I think we've all been looking at the haunted games in this franchise in the wrong light, because frankly, games like FNAF World and the Happiest Day minigames, I don't think ever existed at all. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. Now before I start making huge claims like these games never existed in the first place, we should go over what FNAF World and the Happiest Day minigames are at all, so I can say they don't exist. And we should start with the Happiest Day minigames because frankly they're somehow less arbitrary than FNAF World. In FNAF 3, if you do these specific, very arbitrary actions, you gain access to several different hidden minigames. BB's Air Adventure, Mango's Quest, Chica's Party, Stage 01, and this weird glitchy amalgamate of a bunch of different games. You can just play the minigames normally if you'd like, but there is a goal here. In BB's Air Adventure, you can break out of bounds and go through this weird, messed up area to find a special balloon. If you do a similar thing in Mango's Quest, you can climb balloons up to collect this cake. Once you have it, in BB's Air Adventure, Chica's Party, Stage 01, and the glitched minigame, there are hidden children out of bounds that using the balloons you can reach, and using the cake you can open their eyes. Then, if all 4 children have been found and woken up, when you access the Happiest Day minigame, you, as a child wearing a puppet mask, walk through what seems to be a closed Freddy's until you see these 4 children wearing the FNAF 1 masks, and 1 child off to the side wearing what seems to be a golden Freddy mask. You give this last child a cake, and all the masks drop to the floor and balloons raised to the air. Now, many people, myself included, have pointed out that this entire sequence seems like we're helping these children move on. And I think that is the correct interpretation here, but the big question that gets brushed aside quite often is what is actually going on here? Like, yes, we see the metaphor. We're helping these children move on, but like, what is physically happening in universe here? Is this taking place during FNAF 3? It doesn't necessarily have to, just because it takes place in the game. After all, the FNAF 2 death minigames cover multiple instances of the timeline, all within FNAF 2. But at the same time, you need to interact with the FNAF 3 environment to access these minigames, which you can do at any time, which not only implies that it's taking place during FNAF 3, but implies that Michael Afton is somehow involved in this process. But then a counterpoint to that is that the ways you access these minigames are so weird and arbitrary and fantastical, it's almost evidence against them existing in the first place, unless you think that this wall is literally a keypad. What is this then? When is this? Well, in the past, I've linked the Happiest Day minigames to FNAF World, as have many others for various reasons. So to better understand what's going on here, how about we cover FNAF World now? FNAF World is really strange at all times. There's this whole opening sequence of the like, something bad happened and we can feel it in here or whatever, but after this text we're thrown right into the game, which seems a lot more game-like than anything we've seen before. After all, FNAF World is a standalone game. And as we play this RPG, just like the Happiest Day minigames, you can just play the game normally, but even the game makes fun of you for doing so. After all, it doesn't take long to find the cracks. If you wait around after talking to Fredbear long enough, you meet this glitched Fredbear, which gives you different objectives, tells you to find clocks hidden throughout the map. And each time you touch one of these clocks, you're transported to a very bare bones minigame, where you're setting up one of the ways to access a Happiest Day minigame, like putting Balloon Boy on the poster to access BB's Air Adventure, or prepping the buttons to access Mango's Quest. Then when all the clocks have been collected and all these minigames have been beaten, you can access secret bosses around the map, which eventually gives you access to a hidden box in the middle of the woods. And when you reach it, you get this ending sequence, where it mentions that the breadcrumbs have been left for him, he only has to follow them. Now, interpretations for this game have been mixed at best, but myself personally, I believe that FNAF World is a retelling and revamping of the Happiest Day minigames from FNAF 3. That this is some animating force trying to help spirits move on, specifically for FNAF World with the Crying Child. This gets linked to Shatter Victim and the idea that the Crying Child's memories are scattered throughout the franchises and somebody needs to go and gather them so he can move on. We don't have a lot of time for Shatter Victim today, but for all intensive purposes, FNAF World and FNAF 3's Happiest Day minigames seem to be telling the same story. Again, this interpretation of mine is here to stay, and I go way more into it in this video. But something that I think I and many others have glossed over is what is literally going on in these games. In universe, is it that whoever is assisting these spirits move on is literally making some weird video game purgatory for them to figure out their trauma? Is it called FNAF World? Are they manipulating a video game that already exists as a sort of weird digital Ouija board? Not to mention there's so much evidence, especially in FNAF World, to imply that someone is actively playing this game, and trying to settle on who's doing it is even more insane. What is actually happening? within the universe of this game. So I started theory crafting, and I think I settled on an answer that makes the most sense. And it makes more sense than an in-universe game, and it revolves around what I'm going to call memory delving. Five Nights at Freddy's handles memories in a very interesting way. We see this a few times in the book, we see it mentioned in the movie, but most specifically in the epilogues of Fazbear Frights. In those stories, we begin to learn that spirits and memory are inherently linked, if not one and the same. The spirits of Five Nights at Freddy's almost seem like their memories made manifest more than actual ghosts. And many spirits that linger on are doing so because they're trapped in a horrible memory. For example, I'm going to gloss over a lot of the details here, but at the end of the epilogues of Fazbear Frights, one of the main characters, after having won against the big bad antagonist of the series, is shambling the rest of his ruined body into the Into the Pit ball pit. That same ball pit that seemingly travels back in time. Well, we've learned over the course of the epilogues that there's a lot of weird agony and victimhood around this ball pit, and our current protagonist, shambling towards, falls into the ball pit and continues to sink. This protagonist is full of remnant and has in the past used it to make people's memories happy and help them focus on happier memories. And what do we see him do when he enters the ball pit? He reaches out to one of the balls in it and is transported to the memory of Millie, the main character of Count the Ways. In Count the Ways, Millie leaves her family's Christmas party to go hide inside of a Funtime Freddy chest cavity and gets killed. But we see her again in this epilogue, where she's trapped in some horrible twisted memory, where she's wandering the snowy woods outside of her house, which, again, to be clear, she didn't do in the story. This is a weird, twisted version of her memory. But she's never able to find peace. She endlessly wanders the woods, never able to go home or even find death in these woods, until Jake appears and guides her to her family's house, which is warm and inviting. She goes in and has a lovely Christmas party. But in the real world, one of the balls of the ball pit turns a shimmering gold when this happens. The rest of the epilogue sees Jake reaching out to other victims whose minds are trapped in this ball pit, and one by one, the balls of the ball pit begin to glow that golden shimmer until Jake's body ultimately disappears. So what is literally happening here is that using the rest of the remnant Jake has, he's reaching out to the victims of various Fazbear Fright stories and trying to help them find peace. Reaching out to the spirits who are trapped within their own horrible memories and switching them for a happy one, focusing on that positive memory and allowing that spirit to rest. So why does this matter? Well, let's go back to what we're seeing happen during Happiest Day. The surface of the Happiest Day minigames are just normal, weird arcade games, but the sublayers is where things get tragic and almost a little frightening. After all, these weird figures are literally called Shadow Balloon Boy and the Shadow Puppet in the character encyclopedia. And yes, the character encyclopedia is hit or miss with accuracy, but I generally think that the actual names of the characters are fairly accurate. But think about what this visually represents. A happy, normal thing with sublayers underneath that hide the truth. Is this not a really good metaphor for the conscious and the subconscious, or the waking dreams and the nightmares below? The idea that the top layer here is the ideal, but the flip side is the memory. And it's in those out of bounds areas, in those flip sides, in those subconscious repressed memories that these spirits are stuck. These MCI spirits are trapped and crying with their eyes shut. It takes somebody reaching into those horrible moments and giving them cake, giving them the party they deserve to wake them up and rescue them. This is a repeated theme in Five Nights at Freddy's. If you don't have your memories, you cannot move on. We see this time and time again. The end of the Silver Eyes trilogy sees Carlton having to find the pieces of memory within the weird spiritual realm he gets sent to so that the children of the MCI can remember that William Afton killed them and they can turn on him. We see this in the FNAF movie, where Abby has to communicate through drawings that William Afton was the one to kill the children. And once they see that, they remember and they turn. And we're seeing this again in the games themselves. Spirits trapped in purgatories made of their own horrible memories, until someone is able to reach out to them and help them escape. And again, I said a lot of this before on the channel. This isn't that far off from my previous interpretations of Happiest Day and FNAF World, but the theory previously stopped a couple steps back. Not only are we going further now, we're finally going to touch on something that I either forgot to or had no good idea for. What is literally happening? Because I don't think Happiest Day is literally taking place, that these arcade machines are literally being utilized to help children move on. And I don't even think it's happening in FNAF 3. After all, Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF World are inherently and incredibly linked. I think that both Happiest Day and FNAF World are just visual metaphors for something that is happening in a spiritual sense within Five Nights at Freddy's. The same event, in fact. After the fire of FNAF 6, Charlotte's spirit is freed from Lefty and with it the marionette, and she's able to better maneuver around what's going on. So she uses the remainder of her time to help as many people as she can. Just like Jake at the end of the Fazbear Frights epilogues. She reaches out to every memory she can find within that burning rubble and tries to give them a happier memory, one that they can focus on and find peace with. So by extension, FNAF World and Happiest Day never literally happened. These games, whether they existed in canon or not, were never played like this and never used to help ghosts move on. They are simply a way to show the player and make fun gameplay about some spiritual shenanigans that are going on. The idea of a game where we reached out to the memories of the missing child incident victims and tried to save them in each of their memories is cool and all, but that would far exceed what Scott was capable of producing back in 2017. So at the time, this was the best way to showcase what's going on here. A visual metaphor using the tools that Scott is good at, showing somebody reaching into the subconscious to pull these spirits out of their self-inflicted purgatories. Which, how fitting is it that this is what's going on alongside Ultimate Custom Night? Here Charlotte is using up the last of her being, the last of her remnant, all of her life force, to reach out to people trapped in their own minds and pull them out of it. And at the same time, the vengeful spirit is using everything it has to take William's soul and shove it so deep into his mind that only the sickest, most depraved creatures will ever notice it for the rest of time. That's what we're seeing in Happiest Day and FNAF World. That's what these visual metaphors are telling us. So yes, like I said, this is still the interpretation that I prefer for FNAF World and Happiest Day, but we're taking it a few steps further now. I don't think these games exist at all. I think they are both visual metaphors for something we see at the end of Fazbear Frights. Charlotte using the rest of her remnant to reach out and save as many spirits as she can as she fades away. And I think it's a wonderful and fitting end for the marionette. And I hope it's the end, because again, people should stay dead in this narrative. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. In the meantime, if you want to hear about another game that's arbitrary and hard to parse, last week I went into a possibility that Edwin Murray might be the protagonist of Help Wanted 2. You can find that video right here. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers. Until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.